Hi, very good morning, everyone. Am I audible? Someone please confirm in the chat box whether I'm audible or not.
Yes, Mr. Abdullah, you are audible.
Thank you so much, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I think a few people have joined. Am I audible? Someone please confirm in the chat box whether I'm audible or not. Few people have joined. I think we can wait for another 5 to 10 minutes. So
Yes,
people
yes.
have joined. And we are also on live on YouTube also. So we can start maybe 11:05 or something.
Yes, yes, yes.
I think before that, are you able to share the screen? Can you please check?
Yes, yes, I will do that. Can you see the this screen?
Fine. Yes, it's perfectly fine.
Am I audible and visible properly?
Yes, both are perfect.
Okay,
Thank you
great.
so much, Abhijit, Manish, Alok. Once again, participants, please confirm me whether I'm audible. Yeah, thank you, Manjesh. Thank you, Venkatram. All right, so we are starting today's session. This is a series of sessions will be conducted by Mr. Advocate Vinay Shraff sir, and I'm not taking much time for giving a very long introduction because Vinay Shraff sir needs no introduction. He's been a lawyer for long time in high courts as well as Supreme Court. He has been like appeared for many constitutional matters, constitutional challenges with regarding to direct and indirect taxes. You might be heard about his name in many occasions. So warm welcome, Vinay Sharaf sir. It's been pleasure to associate with you, and very warm welcome to all the participants. It's been a fantastic experience. You are spending time for education in a weekend also. That is very appreciable. Thank you so much for all the participants. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Abdullah, for giving me this opportunity so that I can share my knowledge about the jurisprudence in the erstwhile era. You see, when we talked about this topic, I said that the reason I wanted to share the knowledge about the jurisprudence in the erstwhile era is that we know that the concepts which have come. Am I audible?
I think your voice is breaking. There are some internet issue. It might be. Is it fine now? Am I audible, right?
Yes, you are audible.
It's fine now. You can continue.
It's fine now. Okay. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Abdullah, and thank you all the participants who have joined today on this Sunday to listen to this series of discussion on the jurisprudence in the erstwhile indirect tax regime. The reason I believe that we need to dig into the jurisprudence in the erstwhile era is that the GST law has subsumed the erstwhile indirect taxes, that is central tax, central excise, service tax, VAT, entry tax, and some other indirect taxes also. So why it is important to discuss the jurisprudence in the erstwhile era is that the manner in which the GST law has been drafted, if you carefully read and scrutinize, you will find that the most of the concepts have been borrowed or almost identically worded as they existed in the previous era. So if we know the jurisprudence in the erstwhile regime, we will be able to handle most of the issues of interpretation and the litigation which is going to arise in the near future. We will be effectively and deftly able to handle most of the issues which we are going to face in the coming future. Till now, most of the litigation has centered around the investigative approach of the department, whereby they have gathered some intelligence-based information, mostly regarding, say, non-existence of the supplier or delay in filing of the return, non-filing of the return, cancellation of registration. So the issues regarding the existence of an entity, the cancellation, and input tax credit issues, input tax credit disputes are what we have been facing till now mostly. And there are some authority for advanced ruling judgments, which even though we read and we try to understand the context and the meaning, but mostly it is irrelevant because it is binding only between the department and the concerned SAC. It does not create a binding precedent like a judgment of a tribunal or a high court or a Supreme Court. So while we can always decipher and gather knowledge from a judgment of an authority for advanced ruling, but to have a binding precedent which we can persuade any authority, through which we can persuade any authority, we need to dig deep into the past. We need to look into the jurisprudence which is already there in the disputes which arose in the VAT era, disputes which arose in the central excise era, in the service tax era, in the central sales tax era. So these are all very important. I fortunately have been practicing indirect tax since more than 25 years. And I have had the privilege to see the rise, the birth, and the evolution of VAT law and service tax law, and evolution of central excise, central sales tax, and other indirect tax laws. So I want to discuss what I have learned in all these years. My sole objective is to share the knowledge with you all, so that you can use not only the jurisprudence, but I will also, through this series, try to share my practical experience and the practical side of how to deal with the litigations which we are going to face in the future. Am I not audible? Mr. Suman is saying that no audio. Am I audible, participants? Yes, thank you. So, my objective is to share my knowledge and also to share my practical experience to handle various issues. Now, to start with, I have chosen the topic classification because I believe, considering the multiplicity of rate which is there in the GST era, is going to lead to multiple litigation with respect to classification disputes. Now, one of the reasons I believe that a lot of disputes are going to arise in the GST era is because of this residual entry in the notification 1/2017 central tax rate tariff notification dated 28/6/2007, wherein entry number 453 of Schedule 3 says that goods which are not specified in Schedule 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 or 6 will go to entry number 453. And Schedule 3, we know, is taxable at the rate of 18%. So I believe that in most of the cases, in many of the cases rather, where the department is not able to match the description which a SSE is using in its invoice, the manner in which it is described in its invoice, if it does not match with the description as it is given in the notification with respect to a chapter or subheading, then they may consign it to entry number 453 and they may seek to tax it at the rate of 18%, particularly when you see it is enjoying the benefit of a lower rate of tax, that is 5% or 12% or nil rate, or maybe the benefit of exemption. then the department may try to consign it to residual entry number 453. So now the first question which I wish to discuss is as to how we should correctly classify any goods. Because it is very important that we correctly classify any product. Unless the product is properly classified, since the GST is an indirect tax, transaction-based tax, and if a SSE does not recover it from its customer, and 2 year or 3 year down the line, if the department says that, look, you are not taxable at the rate of 5% or 12%, you are taxable at the rate of 18%, then the amount of tax which the particular SSE will have to pay along with the interest and penalty may result into even the closure of the business, and it may be a death knell for that particular SSE. So it is very important that we understand how a product is classified, the entire rule of interpretation, the basic fundamentals of the classification, and then we go into the discussion of the jurisprudence. So first of all, many of you might be aware that the classification of the goods in the GST regime or earlier era also, it was based on the harmonized system of nomenclature. It is also referred to as HSN code in short. So what is this harmonized system of nomenclature? It is an international convention or the international manner or acceptable manner of description of the product and also the associated numerical code which is assigned to a particular product. It was developed by the World Customs Organization in 1998, and it has been adopted by more than 190 countries, including India. So what it does is that the product is uniformly described in the tariff, and it has an associated code, which is a 6-digit code. But India has adopted a system where some of the products has 8 digits. So the description coupled with the code, whether it is 4-digit or 6-digit or add 8-digit, this is what is called the tariff schedule. Now, in the GST era, unlike in the past, when there used to be a chapter-based manner of tariff described, for example, if you see customs or central excise tariff, it is classified under various chapters. In GST also, that chapter heading is referred, but the GST has adopted a system of notification where the notification 1/2017 is the mother notification. So from time to time, it has been amended. It has 7 schedules. The schedule 1 prescribes a rate of 2.5%. Now 2.5% is CGST, 2.5% is SGST. So identical to the CGST notification, you will find a SGST notification also. So 2.5%, Schedule 1 prescribes a rate of 2.5%, Schedule 2 prescribes a rate of 6%, Schedule 3 prescribes a rate of 9%, Schedule 4 prescribes a rate of 14%. Then Schedule 5, 6, and 7 are not so relevant. Main schedules are Schedule 1 to 4. Now, with respect to classification, since it is a combined law with respect to levy of tax on goods and services, So Schedule 2 to the Central Goods and Services Tax Act classifies any activity or transaction to be treated either as a supply of goods or as supply of services. Because first of all, we need to identify if it is a combined service, if it is a combined supply, composite supply, then whether it is a goods or service. Because only then you will refer to a appropriate notification with respect to notification, either with respect to tariff notification with respect to rate of tax applicable to a goods or rate of tax applicable to a services. So the first task is to distinguish any supply between either goods or service. So once you are done with that, whether it is a goods or services, and that becomes relevant when there is a combined service wherein some element of supply of goods is also there, some element of supply of service is also there. So once we are able to identify whether a particular activity or transaction is a goods or service, then we refer to a relevant notification either under the notification relevant to the rate of tax of goods or rate of tax applicable to a service. Now, I want many of you or some of you might not have had the opportunity to see how the chapter or how the tariff looks like. Because why it is important is that GST Act has adopted in terms of clause 3 to the explanation tariff item, subheading, heading and chapter as they are defined in first schedule to the Customs Tariff Act 1975. So in the customs law, there is a Customs Tariff Act and there is a schedule which is accompanied to the Customs Tariff Act, which prescribes the rate of tax and defines as to how a product is classified. So under the Customs Tariff Act, there are 98 chapters. Now each chapter has chapter notes. Now that chapter also may be under a particular section. So there are section notes also to interpret the how a product will be classified. The chapter consists of a description, the broad description of a commodity. Then there is a 4-digit classification. Then there is a 6-digit classification, and then it may be followed by a 8-digit classification also. So before we further proceed, let us have a look at how a chapter heading, how a chapter looks like under the Customs Tariff Act. You must remember that, you see, the GST has not identically adopted the schedule to the customs tariff. All that it has adopted is subheading, heading, and the tariff item notes to understand as to how a product is to be classified. But it has not identically adopted the description from the Customs Tariff Act. So let us have a look as to how the section and chapter notes looks like. Let us see this section 11 relating to textile and textile article. Now, as you can see, there is a section note to decipher as to how a textile and textile article has to be identified. Whether a article is textile article or not, we have to read this section note. Now it starts with that this section does not cover. So there are items which may look or which may appear to be textile item, but this section note says that these items, even if they appear to be textile item or they are known as textile item, they will not be covered in the textile chapter. For example, if you refer to note H, it says that the woven, knitted or crocheted fabrics, felt or non-woven, impregnated, coated, covered or laminated with plastic or articles thereof of chapter 39. So suppose there is a fabric and it is coated or impregnated with or laminated with plastic. So once that is done, then it will not be covered in the textile and it will go to chapter 39, which is related to plastics. Then similarly, if you see note IJ, it says that the woven, knitted or crocheted fabrics, felt or non-woven, impregnated, coated, covered or laminated with rubber or text articles thereof chapter 40. So if it is laminated with rubber, then it goes to 40. So it is a textile item. For example, it may be an item of, say, cotton fabrics, but the cotton fabric is laminated or coated with, say, article of plastic of chapter 39 or article of rubber of chapter 33, then it disqualifies itself from being classified as a textile product and it goes to either as a plastic product or plastic item or rubber item. So like that, you see, it may also happen that something appears to be an item of plastic, but it may be covered in the chapter heading relating to textile. For example, let us have a look at the section note G. It says that monofilament of which any cross-sectional dimension exceeds 1 mm or stripe or like of an apparent width exceeding 5 mm of plastic So I give you an example because I've dealt with the particular matter with respect to dispute relating to section note 1G. So here, if the item is of plastic, but the strip through which that fabric is made or that item is made, suppose for example a carry bag is manufactured from a strip of a plastic, but the width of that plastic strip does not exceed 5 mm, then despite the fact that it is made of plastic strip, it will be covered in the textile. So it goes both ways. So to understand or read a section note or chapter note is very, very important to understand that where your product will be classified. So as you can see that the section note relating to textile is running into something like 7-8 pages. Then we go to chapter 50. Now here in this particular chapter, there is no particular note to define or to know how a product is to be classified in silk. So we have to necessarily refer to the section note. And once we are done with the section note, then we refer to how the product is described in column 2. But here, I pause for a moment and I stop sharing this because, as I have said, that we need not refer to the description of the goods in the customs tariff act or the rate of duty column or the tariff item, this this particular heading or subheading, we need to refer to notification 1/2017. So to know whether an item is classifiable under a particular chapter or not, we need to understand section note or chapter note. But once we are able to locate under which chapter it is classifiable, then we stop there. Then we did not refer to the description of the good as it is referred in the customs tariff or the heading which is referred to the customs tariff. We stop here and we go to the notification under the GST Act. So now I will just share with you the notification 1/2017. See, I went to the section note. I will also take you through chapter notes of some of the chapter. But prior to that, I wanted to show you how you should identify your product. So what I did is that suppose my item, I have a doubt whether my item is an item of plastic, whether my item is an item of rubber, whether my item is an item of textile. So I go to the section note, I read and I interpret. Then I know that it is an item of textile. So that hurdle is crossed. So once that hurdle is crossed, in order to know under which particular chapter heading or subheading my item is classifiable, we come to the notification 1/2017 under the GST Tariff Act. Rather, sorry, there is no GST Tariff Act, only there is a notification. Unlike the Central Excise or Customs, where there is a Tariff Act and there is a schedule appended to the Tariff Act, here we have a notification. And as you can see, notification 1/2017, at the end of it, there is an explanation, and explanation 3 and 4 are very important. Explanation 3 says that tariff item subheading, heading and chapter shall mean respectively a tariff item, heading, subheading as specified in first schedule to the Customs Tariff Act. And then it says that the rule for interpretation of first schedule to the Customs Tariff Act, including the section, chapter and explanatory notes, shall so far as may be applied to the interpretation of this notification. So as we see that in each schedule, so schedule 1, it starts with chapter heading 03, 04, 05, 06. So it goes on like that. So suppose my item is an item of plastic or say textile. So I see whether it is under, I can find it under schedule 1. I can see that item 39 is not there under schedule 1. That is item applicable to 2.5%. Then I see that chapter heading 14, there are some items which are there. For example, serial number 188, natural rubber, balata and all these items are there. Then toy balloons made of natural rubber latex. So there are some item of rubber which is there in schedule 1. Then I try to locate whether the item of, suppose my item is item of textile. So textile item starts with chapter 50. Now I see whether chapter 50, any of the item is there in the first schedule. I see that chapter 50.004 to 50.006 silk yarn is there in entry number 202. Then entry 203, woven fabrics of silk or silk waste is there. Then entry 204, garneted stock of wool is there. So we try to find out from the description first whether my item which I am manufacturing or selling satisfies the description which is there in this particular notification. And that is how I identify my product. And then I simultaneously identify the chapter heading also in this particular notification, which I mandatorily need to mention in the invoice. Now see, from chapter schedule 1, I move on to schedule 2. Then I see whether my item is there in schedule 2 or not. Now here I see that some item of plastic is there in entry number 81 in 82. Then 83, 84, 85 item of rubbers are there. Some items of rubber are there. Then entry number 133. Friends, can you see the screens here which I am sharing and whether it is visible to all of you? This notification which I am sharing. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, someone is asking me to enlarge the view. So let me see whether I can do that. Okay. So it is better, I guess, now. So as you can see that schedule 2, then I go and try to see whether my item is located in schedule 3. Now in schedule 3, again, I see that there are some items, serial number 104, 105, 106, 107. These are all items of plastic. Then 112 items of rubber, 112, 113, 114, 115. Then 158, 159 are all items of textile. So you see, this is how I have to try to identify whether my item is classifiable under any of the schedule which is there in the notification 1 2017. Now the difficulty is that as you see the description which is based on the harmonized system of nomenclature, that is HSN, but it might so happen that a particular item is not identically worded or known in the commercial parlance or trade parlance in the manner in which it is described in the tariff. It may or may not match the description which is there in the notification. So if that is so, then it might so happen that you may be relegated to entry number 453 of schedule 3, which attracts a rate of tax of 18%. And it says that goods which are not specified in schedule 1, 2, 4, 5, or 7. So there is a great risk if you don't adopt the description which is there in the tariff notification. So my advice to you to avoid litigation in this respect is that when you do the audit or verification of your client's account, then you should see whether the manner in which they are classifying the product, particularly if their item attracts a rate of tax of say 12% or 5%, one should be very, very careful to try and adopt the description which is there in the tariff notification. You may additionally describe it in the manner in which in the manner in which it is known in the market, but one should try to see the manner in which it is described in the tariff and adopt it to the extent possible in order to avoid any potential litigation in the future. That is the first point. Then, in order to, whenever you see it is not possible to identify or to find out as to what is your item, then we have to take recourse to the interpretative rules. So notification 1/2007 says, clause 4 of the explanation to the rate notification 1/2007 says that we must adopt the general rule of interpretation to the customs tariff. So general rule of interpretation of the customs tariff have been borrowed for the purpose of interpretation of a classification of a goods if there is a doubt. So the first principle is that if you are able to identify your product or locate your product on the basis of the description which is there in the tariff notification, then you need not bother about the interpretation of the tariff setting. Sorry, general rule of interpretation. But only by any reasonable means you are unable to identify or locate your product in the notification or match your item with the description which is there in the notification, then only you take recourse to the general rule of interpretation of the customs tariff, which has been borrowed for the purpose of interpreting the GST rate notifications. And Honorable Supreme Court, in the case of Commissioner of Central Excise versus Simplest Mill, I have shared the citation which says that the rule of interpretation can only be invoked when a particular product cannot be identified and when no clear picture emerges from the terms of the heading and the relevant section or chapter notes. So the first rule of interpretation is that you try to find out or identify your item from the heading or the description which is there in the notification. You try to identify your product from the rule of interpretation which is there in the section or chapter notes. If no clear picture emerges thereafter also, then you take recourse to the general rule of interpretation. Now the rule 1 says the same thing, that the title of the section, chapter and sub-chapters are provided for ease of reference only. For legal purposes, classification shall be determined according to the terms of the heading and any relative section or chapter notes. Now, rule 2A of the general rule of interpretation refers to a situation where one is supplying or selling an item in an unassembled condition or incomplete or unfinished form. So this rule 2A says that if an item is incomplete or unfinished, but if it is presented as complete, then it will have the essential character of the finished article. Or if an item is being sold in a, say, knockdown condition or unassembled condition, but once it is assembled, then it will have the character of the complete or finished article, then it will be classified as a finished article or a assembled item only. So suppose one is selling computer, but in a knockdown condition, the supplier of the computer sells computer and assembles the various parts in the premises of the buyer, then the rate of tax which is applicable to the computer will be applicable instead of the rate of tax applicable to the various item. For example, there may be a separate rate of tax for, say, mouse or say CPU or the box or other items of the or the motherboard and all that. But ignoring that, if it is being, if once all the items which are being supplied separately, once they are assembled, then it will take the shape of a computer, then the rate of tax applicable to the computer will apply and not otherwise. Then rule 2B says that any reference to a goods which is a mixed or composite goods, it will mean that the reference to the goods consisting of whole or partly of any material or substance. Now it may apparently may not give you a cool clue as to what it is saying, but let us ignore it. Why I'm saying so? That in the GST Act, mixed and composite supply is defined, and composite supply says that the definition of the composite supply said that the composite supply will be identified as a principal supply. So in a composite supply, if we are able to identify the principal supply, then there is no need to refer to this particular rule. We identify the supply of a composite supply as a principal supply, and then we find out as to what is the rate of tax applicable to that principal supply. Now suppose by application of rule 2A and 2B or rule 1, we are unable to identify the product. Then we take recourse to rule 3. And friends, this is very, very important rule because it also helps us to counter any, you see, reference or any attempt by the department to consign us to entry number 453 of Schedule 53, which in my opinion is a dreaded entry, and whereby I think in future a lot of classification disputes, the departmental officers are going to take recourse to item 453. So it says, rule 3A says, when the heading which provides the most specific description shall be referred to a heading providing a general description. However, when two or more headings each refer to part only of the material or substance contained in the mixed or composite goods, or part only of the items in a setup put up for retail sale, then those headings are to be regarded as equally specific in relation to those goods, even if one of them gives them a more complete or precise description of goods. So the more specific description will prevail over a general description. That is rule number 1. Then rule number 3B says that suppose an item can be equally classified under one or more item, considering the composition of the goods. Then rule 3B says that it will go or it will be classified as that item which gives its essential character. And if rule 3B also fails, suppose they are equal, suppose suppose a textile fabric which is a composite of wool as well as cotton, and one can say that they are equally classifiable under either of them. Both of them gives them its essential character. In that case, rule 3C is a kind of a tiebreaker rule which says that it shall be classified under the heading which occurs last in the numerical order, among those which equally merit consideration. Now, Rule 4 says that suppose by all reasonable means, we are unable to classify an item under rule any of the tariff item, then it says that it shall be classified in according to an item which is most akin to the item which we are supplying. Now, Rule 5A and 5B relates to the packing item, and it says that that should be classified as if with the item which they are sold. So packing item will generally be classifiable with the item they are being sold. Now let us refer to the scheme adopted for the classification of service. I will not spare much time for classification of service because it is easier to identify and there are going to be less disputes with respect to classification of the services. Most of the disputes which I anticipate with respect to the classification are going to arise with respect to classification of goods. But with respect to classification of service, one principle of classification which is common to both the goods as well as services is that the description, we look to the description of an item of supply, and the most specific description is to be preferred over a general description. So this particular rule is common to identification of our item for supply of goods as well as services. Now, suppose we have identified our item under a particular chapter notes, chapter heading and subheading. Now the department disputes it. So if the department disputes it, then there are a number of judgments which says that the burden of proof to dispute the classification is on the taxing authorities. It is for the department to show that an item is wrongly being classified the SSE, and the heading under which the department seeks to classify my product, they should be able to lay enough material and documents and evidences to show that my classification is wrong and the classification which the department is suggesting is the correct one. So this burden of proof is very, very important for us to know. I have referred to 3 citations in this particular slide of the Honorable Supreme Court, and I read out from one of the judgment in the case of Vico Laboratories, which says that the court reaffirmed the test as categorically laid down in the Sri Baidyanath, namely that the burden of proof that a product is classifiable under a particular tariff head is on the revenue and must be discharged by proving that it is so understood by consumers of the product or in common parlance. Now, next is the judgment in the case of Marico Industries Limited of the Supreme Court. This is a recent judgment of 2016. It says that the burden of proof is on the taxing authorities to show that the particular case or item in the question is taxable in the manner claimed by them. There should be material to enter appropriate heading in that regard, and the material may either be oral or documents, and it is for the taxing authority to lay evidence in that behalf even before the first adjudicating authority. So friends, once we are able to reasonably identify under our product under a particular heading or subheading, then our task is easier, unless you have totally misclassified the item, and by no remote resemblance, your item can be said to be the item under which you are seeking its classification. If the department seeks to impose a tax upon you, then the burden is upon the department. Here, my advice is that I've seen that many of the people are running to the authority for advanced ruling, seeking classification. Now, my advice is that first of all, you try to see whether your classification is correct or not. And if you feel that unless there is a very good reason to doubt your understanding, one should not go and rush to the authority for advanced ruling, because once your identification of a classification is reasonable, then the burden will be on the department to seek change of the classification, and the burden is a heavy burden which they may not be able to discharge. It may lead to litigation, but ultimately the success will be yours. Now, the second and most important, I think, the rule, which is a judicially evolved rule of interpretation of classification, is then in the matter of classification of the goods, the common parlance test is the most important test to identify a product. What is most important is to know how a trader looks or how a trader understands a particular product, how the user identifies a particular product, and the classification has to be on the basis of how the user or the trade or the consumer identifies a product. The chemical, the understanding of which is of a technical nature should be ignored, and the common parlance or the trade parlance understanding will override any technical understanding or scientific understanding of a product. Now, here I refer to some of the judgments which are very, very important in the context of the commercial parlance or trade parlance test. Here, this judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in the case of Connaught Plaza Restaurant Private Limited, it was held that in the absence of statutory definition in precise terms, it is construction of words, entries, and items in the taxing statutes in terms of their commercial or trade understanding or according to their popular meaning. It operates on a standard of average reasonable person who is not expected to be aware of technical details of goods. It is construction in sense that people conversant with subject matter of statutes attribute to it. Rigid interpretation in terms of scientific and technical meaning is to be avoided. However, when legislature has provided a statutory definition of particular entry, word, or item in scientific, specific, or technical terms, then interpretation ought to be in accordance with that meaning and not accordance to the common parlance. So, friends, again, we go back to the original rule. First of all, we try to identify our item in accordance with the chapter heading, the description, the chapter notes, and the section notes. If the item which we are seeking classification is defined in a particular manner in the chapter note or section note or in the tariff schedule, then we go by that understanding or the meaning which is already defined. But if it is not defined, which is the case in 99% of the item, you will find only less than 1% of the items which are really defined or which are identified or defined in a particular manner either in the section note or chapter note in the tariff schedule. Then we have to fall back upon the common parlance test. So this common parlance test, according to me, is the most important test in the identification of the product. We first take recourse to the heading and subheading. Now that heading or subheading may be technically this way or that way, but if the trade identifies a particular item in a particular manner, then we have to overlook every other thing and see how the consumer looks at the product and what is his perception, and the user understanding is the most important factor in classification of a product. Now I refer to some other important judgments like Sri Vaidyanath Ayurved Bhavan, where it was said that what is important to be seen is to how the consumer looks at a product and what is his perception in respect of a product. The user's understanding is a strong factor in determination of classification of product. Now, in this Supreme Court judgment, KDI Agglomerated Marbles Limited, it was held that the primary object of classifying products in fiscal statute like Central Excise Act being for raising revenue, the settled rule of interpretation is that the various heading or subheadings in the tariff should be understood not in the strict scientific in technical sense, but in their popular sense. That is the meaning assigned to them by those trading in and using the product. Now, I refer to one more judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court, whereby it was held that there is no fixed test for classification of a taxable commodity. This is probably the reason why the common parlance test or the commercial usage test are the most common. Whether a particular item will fall within a particular tariff heading or not has to be decided on the basis of the tangible material or evidence to determine how such an article is understood in common parlance or in commercial word or in trade circle or in its popular sense meaning. It is they who are concerned with it, and it is the sense in which they understand it what constitutes the definitive index of legislative intention when the statute was enacted. Now, in this another very important Supreme Court judgment, it was said, in determining the meaning or which was connotation of words and expression describing an article or commodity, the turnover of which is taxed in sales tax enactment, if there is one principle fairly well settled, it is that the words or expression must be construed in the sense in which they are understood in the trade by the dealer and the consumer. It is they who are concerned with it, and it is the sense in which they understand it that constitute the definitive index of legislative intention when the statute was drafted. Now, there is another very important judgment of Honorable Supreme Court. I am reading out the last few sentences from this judgment. It is a matter of common experience. It is a matter of common experience that the identity of an article is associated with its primary function. Now, friends, this is an extension of the commercial parlance test. That is a functional test. So it says that we have to try to identify what is the function of the test, and if through functional test also we are able to relate the product to the description in the chapter heading, then that this test also can be adopted to classify a product. It says that it is a matter of common experience that the identity of an article is associated with its primary function. It is only logical that it should be so. When a consumer buys an article, he buys it because it performs a specific function for him. There is a mental association in the mind of the consumer between the article and the need it supplies in his life. It is the functional character of an article which identifies it in his mind. Now, it was a dispute relating to glass mirror. So the dispute was whether it has to be classified as a mirror or a glass, because it entailed different rates of tax. So it was said that in the case of a glass mirror, the consumer recalls primarily the reflective function of the article more than anything else. It is a mirror, an article which reflects images. It is referred to as glass mirror only because the word glass is descriptive of the mirror in which glass has been used as a medium for manufacturing the mirror. So here you see the functional test was adopted to classify the article. The dispute was whether it is an article of glass or whether it is a glass mirror. So it was held by the Honorable Supreme Court that the function which it performs is that of a mirror. So the medium, which is glass, becomes irrelevant. It pales into insignificance, and it has to be classified as a mirror and not as a glass, despite the fact that you see it is made of the glass. But it is not the buyer or the consumer who is buying it, not buying it because it is a glass. They are buying it because it is performing the function of a mirror. So sometimes you see the functional set test, which is in a way subset of a common parlance or the consumer understanding test only, is also a very useful test to identify a product and its classification. Now the next test is essential character test. Here you see it is an extension of the Rule 3B interpretation rule. So if an item is a composite article, then we have to refer as to what is the essential character it possesses. And we have to classify the article, which is a composite article, in accordance with the essential character which it has. So there also I have referred to a judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court, which is very useful to refer to this essential character test. For example, presently, you see, the dispute is going on with respect to the classification of an item, whether an item is a fly ash block or whether it is simply a article of stone, because the department is trying to classify it is an article of a cement, whereas the fly ash is the dominant or the essential character of that particular item. It is also known in the market as a fly ash brick or a block. But it also has the cement which is used for the purpose of manufacture. So the question is whether it is an article of cement or whether it is an article of, whether it is to be referred to as a fly ash blocks, because fly ash block, the government has a reduced rate of tax from time to time. Earlier it was 5%, now 12%. Department is trying to classify it as an item of cement, but since the essential character of the item is fly ash, in the market it is known as fly ash. So in my view, it should be classified as a fly ash block. Now the next, you see the rule, which is Rule 2A. Is classification of unfinished item. Now the Rule 2A said that an item which is unfinished but which has the essential character of the finished item will be classified as a finished item, even though it has not taken the shape of a finished item. In this particular dispute, the dispute was with respect to classification, whether an item is classifiable as a item of crayon, plastic crayon, or whether it is an item of pigment and preparation based on unformulated or unstandardized form, not ready for use. So here it was an unfinished item. It was an unfinished crayon. So the department tried to say that no, it is a preparation of an unformulated or an unstandardized or unprepared form, not ready for use, because obviously it was not ready for use. Whereas the SEC wanted it to be classified as a plastic crayon, because even though it was unfinished, but it has all the character or characteristics of a finished item of a plastic crayon. So ultimately, Honorable Supreme Court said that the basic characteristic or the shape is immaterial if after the finishing, that unfinished or incomplete article will acquire or have the essential characteristics of a complete or finished article, then it will go to the heading which is most appropriate to such complete or finished item. Now, one very important, I think, issue or the box of dispute which is going to arise is that it is quite possible that you are classifying your item in a particular manner in the erstwhile era. In central excise, we all know that the rate of tax was almost uniform across various chapter headings. Over a period of time, in the central excise era at least, the rate of tax, whether you are selling an item of plastic or a rubber or a textile, the rate of tax was uniform, that is 14.5%. But now, the rate of tax, there are about, say, effectively, if I may say so, there are 4 rate of tax. Nil rate of tax, 5%, 12%, 18%. I am leaving out the rest of the rates of tax. So principally there are 4: nil, 5%, 12%, 18%. Now it may so happen that an item may be classified, as I was discussing or showing you the section note of a textile item. Now an item may be an item of plastic. An item may be said to be an item of textile. Now with respect to textile, the rate of tax is less. If it is an item of plastic, then the rate of tax is 18%. So now the department will try to say that, look, you are selling an item of plastic, where will the SSC say, no, it is an item of textile. Now it was quite possible that in the erstwhile era, you had adopted a classification or the chapter note which was relevant to item of plastic, because it did not matter to you. The rate of tax was uniform, whether it was an item of plastic or whether it was an item of textile. But now in the GST era, since the rate of tax on a textile item is beneficial, so obviously you will like to take the advantage of that. The question is whether it is possible for you to change the classification, or whether you will be prevented or can be prevented from doing so, because all along, say for more than, say, 20 years, 30 years, you have been classifying it in a particular manner. So can the department say that no, now we cannot allow you to change the classification because you have been adopting a particular classification for so long. So you now cannot now come and say that, you see, now my item is an item of fabric and it is not an item of plastic. So herein, there are several judgments which will come to your rescue. The number one, which I am discussing right now, is Dunlop India Limited versus Dunlop India Limited and Madras Rubber Factory versus Union of India. It is a Supreme Court judgment. I read out the relevant paragraph. At one stage, Mr. Sanghi pointed out that in certain bill of entry of Dunlop India Limited, their agents, Messer so-and-so, gave the ICT item number 87 with regard to the imported VP latex. This, according to Mr. Sanghi, clearly shows how the appellant themselves have understood the matter. There is, however, no estoppel in law against a party in taxation matter. In order to clear the goods for the customs, the appellant's agents may have given the classification in accordance to wishes of the authorities, or they may even be under some misapprehension. But when the law allows them the right to ask for refund on a proper appraisement, and which they actually applied for, we do not attach any significance to this aspect of the matter pointed out by counsel. The question is of general importance and must be decided on its merits. So here, all along, you see, in the past, an SSE was classifying any item in a particular manner in a particular tariff item. Now, subsequently, an exemption was given with respect to a different tariff heading. They wanted to classify it under that heading, which was beneficial to them. The department objected. Honorable Supreme Court said that, look, it is a point of law. It is a matter of general importance, and it should be decided on its merit and not how you have conducted yourself in the past. Now, there are a couple of, you see, tribunal judgments which I have extracted. It says that the mere wrong classification of the goods in the question by the respondents at one stage did not operate as a estoppel res judicata against them for claiming the classification under correct tariff heading, subheading of the Central Excise Tariff Act. The impugned order of the learned Commissioner appeal in this regard in all the appeals are perfectly valid, and we don't find any illegality in same. So here the tribunal said that wrong classification at one stage does not act as a estoppel against them for claiming the correct classification subsequently. Now, in this next Supreme Court judgment, it is the department which wished to change the classification. So here the Supreme Court says that the appellant contends and that the department, having earlier approved the classification of the tie bar nuts under tariff item 68, has no jurisdiction for its revision, is to our mind not tenable, is in as much as there could be no estoppel against a statute. If according to law, tie bar nuts fall within tariff item 52, the fact that the department earlier approved their classification under tariff item 68 will not stop it from revising that classification to one tariff item 52. So here it went in favor of the department. They wanted to change the classification, which was approved by them. The SSE objected, but the Honorable Supreme Court said that there can be no estoppel against a statute. If according to law an item is classifiable under a particular tariff heading, it should be classified in accordance with the law. And I have referred to one more Supreme Court judgment. Now there is a very recent case which has arose in the context of GST era. Here the petitioner was classifying an item in a particular manner in the erstwhile era because obviously it was immaterial. The rate of tax in which the dispute was going on and the chapter heading which the department wanted it to classify was same. So the SSE was the SSE was totally it did not matter to the SSE. Now, subsequently, when the GST law came, the tariff heading, which was declared by a long-drawn dispute, to which the SSE was not a party to, held that the item is classifiable under a particular heading. Now, this particular heading was beneficial to the SSE. He wanted to change it. the department objected. The Honorable Madras High Court said that the petitioner's past conduct cannot operate as a estoppel. So the petitioner past conduct cannot come in the way of his seeking the right classification. And if the classification which the SSC is seeking is the correct, legally correct one, then they should be permitted to classify it correctly. Now, in this particular Supreme Court judgment, which is also a recent judgment, here the SSC was classifying it as an electrical equipment, and it was an item which was being used in the railway signal. It was an item of use of the railway signal. Up to 86, the SSC was classifying it as an item of electric. Now, from 86 till 93, they were classifying it as an electric item. Now, 93 onwards, there was a change of rate of tax. Rate of tax on the railway equipments or the railway signaling equipments was lesser than the electrical equipment. The SSC sought a reclassification as a railway equipment because the item which was being supplied can only be used as a railway equipment, even though it was an electrical item, but it could have been used only as a part of the railway signaling system. So the department objected, but the Honorable Supreme Court upheld the SSC's contention to seek classification under the railway signaling system, because this is what was the correct classification in accordance with the law. Now, there are some other judgments also which I have referred to in this particular side. These are all tribunal judgments, which says that the wrong classification in one stage does not preclude an SSC from seeking correct classification at a later stage. Now, this is again, there are some citations which I have given in this particular site with respect to the proposition of law that there can be no estoppel against the law. And if the item is being wrongly classified in the past, it does not mean that it should continue to be classified in a wrong manner in the future also. Now, there is another very important proposition of law in the matter of classification, and which, in fact, is contrary to what I have just discussed, that if it is a long-standing classification, then whether that has to or continue to be adopted. Here, there are two judgments which I have referred to, but they are against the department. I have referred to a number of judgments which are in favor of the SSC, that if the SSC is seeking the correct classification, he cannot be prohibited from doing so. I have referred to few judgments where the department is seeking the correct classification, which was wrong classification, and the SSC tried to object to it, but the Supreme Court overruled that objection. But here are two judgments which are in favor of the SSC rather, in the sense that the item was being classified in a particular manner for very long, and subsequent to that, the department sought a new classification which was more beneficial to the department. But in these two judgments, Honorable Supreme Court has said that when the revenue has accepted a particular classification in a particular manner for very long, then the onus will be on the department to show that why a different interpretation should be resorted to when there is no change in the manner in which it is described and the composition or any other such thing. So again, the burden is on the revenue. So it speaks of the burden on the revenue to seek a change in the classification. So I think this is very, very important, that even when the department is seeking any change of the classification, there is a heavy burden which lies upon them to establish through the material and the evidences to show that the change which they are seeking is correct. Now, another important proposition of law, that an expert opinion cannot be ignored unless the department has a material to discard the opinion of an expert. So my advice in case of a classification dispute is that there are 2-3 things which a assessee should do immediately as soon as a classification dispute is raised by the department. We know that there is a heavy burden which lies on the shoulders of the department to lay evidences to seek change in the classification. So whether they are able to discharge their burden or not is a matter which is not in our control. But what is in our control is to substantiate the classification which we are seeking. In order to substantiate that, any assessee should do 2 things first. One is to try to gather evidences with respect to the commercial or the trade understanding of their product, how they are known in the market. And in order to do that, they can take some declaration or certificate from some of their reputed customers. They can take an affidavit or some declaration from their trade association or chamber of commerce that, look, this particular product is classified in this manner only, and it is understood in this manner by the trade. So in order to substantiate your trade understanding, you take some certificate or declaration or affidavit from your customers, which are well-known, reputed customers. It may be government, the government department also. Then you take some sort of a declaration or certificate from the trade association. You may also get your product tested by a government laboratory or any reputed laboratory and see what your item is and get an expert opinion on the certificate. And in order to corroborate that your product is the same one which your competitor is selling and which he is also describing and selling in the same manner, you get the item of your customer also tested and have a copy of the invoice of your competitor and see whether your product is comparable to your competitor's product, how they are describing it, how you are describing it, and if they are one and same, then you pass the test of the commercial parlance test also, and you also have an opinion of expert in your head. Once you have opinion of expert in your hand, then that opinion cannot be discarded by the department unless and until they are able to gather any credible evidence in their favor from a credible source. So I think it is very important to gather evidence in your favor as soon as any classification dispute arises. So I have referred to some of the judgment which talks about that unless the department has a contrary material, they cannot discard the finding of an expert. Here I refer to one of the judgment of the Supreme Court, which says that be that as it may, the department itself drew samples on the said product on more than one occasion. The deputy chief chemist has given test report and communicated the same white later dated so-and-so, stating that the sample which forms of a liquid is composed of mineral oil and a small amount of additives. Now, I refer to the last few sentences which says that it is well settled and need no restatement at our hands that the test report given by the chemical examiner are binding upon the department in the absence of any other acceptable evidence produced by it in rebuttable. In the present case, the department has neither produced any evidence to rebut the reports of the chemical examiner nor impeach the findings of the test report. Now here, I have referred to some High Court judgments. A Gujarat High Court judgment says that once the competent authority who is technically qualified to tender opinion in related to technical standards prescribed under the provision of Food Adulteration Act and rules thereunder as tendered his opinion, it would not be open to take a contrary stand unless until such technical opinion is displaced by the scientific and cogent opinions in the form of another technical opinion. Now I refer to one judgment of the Supreme Court, which says that affidavits and certificates from experts, professionals, and persons in the trade presented before the board in 1981 and considered by the board. Same material presented before tribunal in 1993 by the appellant. No counter material produced from the department. Tribunal not justifying in rejecting the appellant's material as manufactured evidence or stereotype evidence. So friends, here one thing is very important, that you may not have in your possession or you may not be able to access any government laboratory or government expert. But even if it is so, you may obtain a certificate of a chartered engineer or any professional or expert in the field who may be able to identify your product and say that, look, this is the product in which it is known, and these are the characteristics of this particular item. So this is also very, very important to identify your experts and take a certificate from your experts. Now, there are some judgments which I am going to refer to, and which is very, very important to counter the claim of the department to try to consign your item to an item of general description or a residuary entry number 453 of Schedule 3, which attracts 18% of tax. Here, the principle of law, which has evolved over a period of time, is that the specific entry will prevail over the general or the residual entry. In this particular case, CCE versus Chapdani Industries Limited, the Honorable Supreme Court said that in the present case, since the goods were covered by a specific heading, the same cannot be classified under the residuary heading at all. This is clearly read down in Rule 3A of the interpretive rules set out above. As per the rule, said rule interpretive rule 3A, the heading which provides the most specific description shall be preferred to the heading providing a more general description. Then it says that when an article by all standards a reasonable claim to be classified under an enumerated item in the tariff schedule, it will be against the very principle of classification to deny it the parentage and consign it to the orphanage of the residual clause. Then it further refers to a Supreme Court judgment and says that the question before us is whether department is right in claiming that the item in question are dutiable under the tariff entry 68. This, as mentioned already, is the residual entry. Only such goods as cannot be brought under the various specific entries in the tariff should be attempted to be brought under the residuary entry. In other words, unless the department can establish that the goods and question can by no conceivable process of reasoning be brought under any of the tariff item, resort cannot be had to the residuary item. So the Honorable Supreme Court says that we should make all attempts to try to classify it under a particular chapter heading instead of a residuary item. If all the attempts fail, by no conceivable means you can classify it under a particular heading, only then you take recourse to the residual entry. Now, similar proposition of law is given in some other judgments also. Now, another very also important proposition of law in the matter of the classification is that when two views are possible, then the view which benefits the SSE should be adopted. So the benefit of doubt will go to the favor of the SSE and not to the department. Here I have referred to one Supreme Court judgment explaining this above proposition of law. It says that one aspect deserves to be noticed in this context. The earlier tariff advice number so and so, on the basis of which trade notice number so and so was issued by the collector of central excise, is binding on the department. It should be given effect. There is no material to record to show that this has been rescinded or departed. Even assuming that the later tariff has a different view about which there is no positive material, the facts about point out of the concerned department itself was that the considerable doubt about the matter. The position was not free from doubt. It was far from clear. In such a case where the two opinions are possible, the SSE should be given the benefit of doubt, and that opinion which is in its favor should be given effect. Then there is another Supreme Court judgment which says that it is now a settled principle of law that when two views are possible, one which favors the SSE should be adopted. Another Supreme Court judgment says that in the case of classification, the entry which is beneficial to the SSE requires to be applied. There are other Supreme Court judgments also, which I have referred to in this slide, which refers to the same proposition of law. Now, the last aspect which I wish to discuss is that suppose you classify your product in a particular manner and a circular comes out and it says that it has to be classified in a particular manner henceforth. Now, for the period prior to the clarification, whether the extended period of limitation can be invoked. So in this regard, there is a judgment of the Honorable High Court which says that once the reclassification notification circular is issued, the revenue cannot invoke the extended period of limitation to make demand for a period prior to the said notification. So friends, with this, I come to the end of discussion from my side. Whatever I wish to discuss with respect to the issue which are going to arise in future in the matter of classification and how to deal with them, I'm very happy to take up the questions from you all. There is a question from Mr. Vicky Parmar. He asked whether goods exempted under the CGST law, can this exemption provision under the GST law is also applicable under the GST compensation to state act? Mr. Vicky, this is a dispute relating to the interpretation of the exemption law. I request audiences to restrict your queries with respect to the topic under discussion. We are going to cover all the topics. There are some participants who have queries relating to ITC. There are some which refers to the Dilip Kumar judgment or the issue of the exemption. I am going to discuss all the topics, the issue of interpretation of exemption notification and all. But the issue relating to the ITC and all other issues wherein I feel there is going to be a potential litigation. But for the time being, I wish to restrict my discussion to the issues relating to classification. Now somebody, Mr. Khemka is asking, as referred to in notification N1 2017, we found only 4-digit SN code. Then should we refer to SETA for next 4 digit? Yes, we can go to customs tariff. Don't go to central excise tariff act. Even though central excise tariff and customs tariff acts are similarly worded, but to be cautious, it is better to refer to the customs tariff act for your 6-digit or 8-digit classification. Mr. Siddharth Duge is asking if I'm supplying plastic parts for vehicles, whether the chapter 39 is applicable or chapter related to vehicle. Mr. Siddharth, I believe that, you see, this is a query relating to whether an accessory should be classified as a accessory to the main item, or whether it should be classified as a item of which it is made of. I think there are a number of judgments with this regard relating to the classification of an accessory. And the general principle is that the accessory has to be classified as an item of which it is part of. If you have seen, I have discussed a judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court with respect to the dispute whether an item is an item of electric or whether it is an item of the railway railway display system. So the Honorable Supreme Court says that since it is an accessory or an item relating to a railway signaling system, so it will go with the railway signaling system and not as an item of not as an electrical item. So I believe that if a plastic item is accessory or part of a vehicle, then it will go not go under chapter 39 applicable to plastics, but it will go to the chapter applicable to vehicle. Mr. Manjesh R is asking, laptop classifying under FT47 together with CIF, transportation cost included, should the freight charges be classified under 9965 or 8471? Here the answer lies in the definition of the composite goods. The definition of the composite goods says that you have to identify the principal supply and the incidental supply will be classified along with the main supply. So if one is buying the laptop, then the transportation is incidental to the purchase of the laptop, and the transportation cost will be included in the cost of the laptop, and you have to discharge your tax burden as under chapter 18471 instead of 9965. Aluminum foil goods food disposable container can be classified as a aluminum utensils. You see, we have discussed the rule 5A of the interpretative rules, general rule of interpretation, which says that a container or a package will go with the item with which it is sold. So if it is a food container, then it should be classified with the food item and not as a food aluminum utensils. So please refer to rule 5 of the general rule of interpretation. Then there is a question, what is the Mr. Ganesh is asking whether this webinar may be shared to our emails or we can view the recordings. It is already available in the YouTube. I can request the the YouTube be shared with you all, that, or you may access it on your own in the YouTube. Then there is a question: what is the HN code for health mix containing cereals and pulses? If you elaborate your query, then probably I can make an attempt to answer your query. I am not able to exactly understand. Then there is a query whether refill for ball pen will be classified under which chapter. Refill for ball pen is an accessory of ball pen, and it should be classified with the ball pen. Then someone is asking, what is article under tariff and how is it different from parts? Mr. DK, I am not able to understand what you wish to ask. Please be elaborate. How do we classify LD charges, late fee, or interest on late payment received? You have to classify it as an item with respect to which it is levied. So suppose you have sold, say, car or a motor vehicle, and it is the rate of tax is 28%. And the late fees is applicable relating to the sale of the motor vehicle. Then the late fees or interest and other things will be classified as that only, and you have to pay 28% only. Yes, I will certainly share the PPT with you all. Someone is asking, what if the department relies on the expert opinion? Now you see, Mr. Kaushik, if the department may rely upon the expert opinion, but if you are able to counter it with the common parlance taste, then that will prevail over the technical taste. So the first and foremost taste is the common parlance or the trade understanding. And after that only we refer to the expert opinion or the technical understanding of a particular matter. Uh, then someone is asking, supply of combo pack of washing powder with free gift of a plastic bucket, whether comes under the composite or mixed supply. It is obviously a composite supply. The plastic bucket is only incidental to the supply of the washing powder, and it should be classified. In fact, note, if it is a free gift, then it is not being taxed separately. Then Mr. Dukania is asking, in case of port, whether the berth or terminals will be considered as if it is plant or machinery or civil asset, and we are able to take input tax credit. Mr. Dokania, and to all my learned friends, my request to you, all of you, is to restrict your queries to the topic under discussion today. I understand that you have many queries, but I assure you that in the 10 sessions which I'm going to take on a fortnightly basis, all your issues I'm going to answer, everything will be discussed, but we are going to take it topic wise. So we will not, you see, discuss the topic, or I will not take up the queries which is not related to today's discussion. Thank you very much. I hope you appreciate. And one just more announcement which I wish to make is that ideally I should be taking the next session on 11th of December, but due to some personal difficulty, I will be taking the next session on 18th of December. So instead of this being fortnightly, the next session will be after 3 weeks. With this, I think we can close our today's session, Mr. Abdullah. So what do you say?
Yes, sir. We can close it now, and we'll announce the next session's date, maybe December 11 or December 18. We will finalize it and we'll announce it later. And all the participants will be informed next session date due to prior to the date. And thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the time. And a lot of people are messaging me. This should be continue for like long time. Like everybody is enjoying. I think there are a lot of comments are coming in the chat box itself. The session is very excellent. I'm getting personal message also in the WhatsApp. And thank you so much. It's indeed a great thought-provoking session. So there will be a good future for professionals like chartered accountants, lawyers. Like there are umpteen number of litigations are coming lining up. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I request you to kindly share the PPT with the participants. I will share with you.
Definitely. We'll do that.